The night he broke my leg, his mother said I provoked him. She needs to learn her place, Judith snapped as I lay bleeding on the floor, my children watching from the hallway. Ben had just hurled a glass dish across the room. I'd asked him to lower the TV so our daughter could sleep. That's all it took. The sound of bone cracking echoed louder than my scream. Judith didn't flinch. She wiped her hands on her apron and muttered, "A wife should be more obedient." That was the moment I knew, not just that I was alone, but that one day, they'd both hear me roar. I wasn't always quiet. When Ben and I first met, I was full of life, loud laughter, big dreams, and even bigger faith in love. He chased me like I was the last good thing in the world. Back then, I believed him. The first slap came 6 months after our wedding. He said he was tired. Said I talked too much. I apologized. Not because I was wrong, but because I didn't want to lose what we had. By the time Judith moved in, I was already shrinking, walking on eggshells, hiding bruises under long sleeves, pretending things were just hard right now. They never stopped hurting me. I just got better at hiding it. Judith treated Ben like a king. No matter what he did, it was always my fault. When he quit his job without warning, she said, "He's too talented to work under fools." When he spent our rent money on sports bets, she laughed, "Boys will be boys." But when I missed a spot cleaning the stove, she'd glare and say, "You're lucky he even married you." She poisoned every corner of our home with blame and entitlement. Even my children began to notice. "Why is Grandma always mad at you?" my daughter Tessa once asked. I smiled and said, "She just wants the best for us." But inside, I was already burning. Our home became a war zone with no bullets, just silence and tasks. I was the maid, the cook, the nanny, the punching bag, everything but a wife. Ben slept all day, argued all night. Judith criticized my parenting, my cooking, my posture. I'd wake at 5 a.m. to prep school lunches, iron uniforms, and sweep floors before work. My teaching job barely paid enough, so I sold handmade candles online just to keep the lights on. Ben never asked how we survived. Judith never lifted a finger. Once, I asked her to help bathe Kyle. She scoffed, "That's your job, I raised my son. Now raise yours." And I did. Alone. The first time a teacher at school noticed, I lied. "Oh, this?" I smiled, pointing to the bruise on my wrist. "Kitchen cabinet." It wasn't. Ben had yanked me back when I tried to leave a room. I wore sweaters in summer, makeup to bed, and smiles that cracked under pressure. Even Tessa started leaving drawings of our family with one figure far off in the corner, me. Judith saw the bruises too. One night, she whispered, "If you stopped provoking him, he wouldn't have to teach you lessons." I said nothing. But inside, something shifted. I wasn't just covering bruises anymore. I was covering a war that I refused to lose. I started counting hours, not days. How many hours until Ben exploded? How long could I keep the kids distracted? How fast could I cover a bruise before school? Every day became survival math. Judith watched from her armchair throne, offering nothing but judgment. She'd say, "You knew who he was before you married him," then sip her tea like she hadn't raised him to be this way. I stopped calling my family. They were tired of excuses I didn't dare explain. Even God started feeling far away. But one night, after Ben punched a hole through the kitchen door, I stood in the bathroom, holding my breath. And I promised myself, either I survive this, or I disappear. It was a humid Saturday. I'd spent hours at the farmer's market, pushing through crowds with Kyle on my hip and groceries strapped to my back. When I got home, I cooked his favorite. Chicken stew and mashed potatoes, just the way Judith claimed he liked it. Ben barely looked at me. He took one bite and spat it on the floor. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "Trying to poison me now?" Before I could answer, the plate shattered against the wall. Judith didn't blink. She just picked up her Bible and said, "Maybe next time, listen to directions." And something inside me, something buried, finally stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But my voice was steel when I spoke. "I work, I cook, I raise our kids while you sleep and bet away our bills. You don't get to break things and call it love." The room went still. Even Judith looked up. Ben stared at me like I'd lost my mind, or worse, found it. "You dare raise your voice in my house," he said, standing. "I dare," I replied. "And it's my house too. I pay for it." The silence after that was heavier than his fists. Because I knew what was coming. But I also knew I'd never be silent again. His eyes darkened. He moved fast, faster than I'd ever seen. The first punch caught my cheek. The second hit my ribs. Judith didn't stop him. She stood there, arms folded, whispering, "You brought this on yourself." Tessa screamed from the hallway. Kyle cried, clutching her hand. But Ben didn't stop. He dragged me by the hair across the floor like I was nothing. I felt something snap in my leg, sharp, electric pain shot through my body. When I tried to crawl, he kicked me hard. The last thing I saw was the ceiling spinning, and my daughter's terrified eyes. Then, darkness. I woke to the soft beep of a heart monitor. Sterile walls. A tube in my arm. Pain blooming everywhere. A nurse hovered nearby. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes said it all. "You've been unconscious for 3 days," she said. My leg was wrapped in layers of gauze. Ribs fractured. Spleen bruised. But it wasn't just my body that hurt. It was the weight of knowing this was the cost of finally speaking up. Tessa and Kyle weren't allowed to visit yet. Ben and Judith hadn't shown up. The officer by the door said, "We have enough to press charges." And for the first time in years. I didn't say no. I used to say I stayed for the kids. But lying in that hospital bed, bruised and broken, I realized, I stayed because I was scared. Scared of what people would say. Scared of raising 2 children alone. Scared no one would believe me. Judith's voice echoed in my head. "You made your bed, now lie in it." But this wasn't a bed. It was a cage I had dressed up with hope. Every day I chose silence, I gave him more permission. And now? Now my silence had nearly killed me. I turned to the ceiling, tears blurring the light above. This ends with me, or it never ends at all. Tessa stood at the edge of my hospital bed, clutching her little brother's hand. She looked older than 10, like she'd seen too much, too soon. "Why didn't you tell us, Mommy?" she whispered. Her voice cracked like glass under weight. Kyle just stared at the bandages on my leg, then looked away. "I didn't want you to hate him," I said. "I thought I was protecting you." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "We don't hate you," she said. "We just want you to be okay." And in that moment, I felt something break open inside me. Not pain. Not fear. Just clarity. I wasn't protecting them by staying. I was protecting him by being silent. The knock came 3 days later. 2 officers. Calm voices. Clipboards in hand. They asked questions I never thought I'd answer. "Has he hit you before?" "Yes." "Was your mother-in-law aware?" She watched. Every word felt like opening an old wound. But I didn't flinch. I told them everything, how long it had gone on, how many times I'd lied, how Judith had blamed me each time. They nodded, took notes, and then one of them said, "Ma'am, we'll make sure he doesn't touch you again." For the first time in years, I believed someone. Not because they said it with force. But because I was finally done saying nothing. I was still in a wheelchair the day they arrested him. Ben stood on our porch in a stained white tank top, arguing with an officer. Judith shouted from behind him, "This is a family matter. You can't take him." But they did. Handcuffs clicked, wrists behind his back. He locked eyes with me as they walked him to the car, not angry, not sorry, just stunned. Like he never thought I'd have the strength to fight back. Judith screamed my name like a curse, swearing I'd regret it. But I didn't flinch. I sat there, watching the car disappear down the street. And for the first time, the air in my lungs didn't feel borrowed. It felt mine. Rehab was brutal. Every step on my healing leg felt like fire running through my bones. Crutches became my new normal. Some days, a wheelchair. But I showed up, every single session. Not just to walk again, but to become someone my kids could lean on without fear. Tessa helped me do stretches. Kyle held my hand through every painful lift. We became a team, scarred but standing. Judith never visited. Not once. And honestly, I didn't need her guilt or her silence. The woman I was before had waited for permission to be strong. The woman I was becoming? She didn't ask anymore. It started with a journal entry. Raw. Honest. Just for me. But one night, I posted it online, anonymously. A letter to the woman I used to be. I see your bruises. I see your silence. But I promise, there's life on the other side of fear. I thought no one would read it. By morning, it had been shared over 2,000 times. Comments poured in. Women. Men. Survivors. Strangers. All saying, this is my story too. I cried reading them. Not out of sadness, but because for once, I wasn't invisible. My pain had a purpose. My voice had weight. And I wasn't alone anymore. Grace Women's Shelter reached out first. They'd read my blog and asked if I could speak at their next support group. I hesitated. What would I even say? But Tessa looked at me that night and whispered, "Mommy, you're brave now." So I went. Crutch in hand, heart pounding. I shared my story, not the polished version, but the truth. The room was silent. Then a woman across from me whispered, "I thought I was the only one." And just like that, something shifted. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a bridge. A light. A warning flare in the dark. I walked out of that room changed. Because I realized I was helping others heal, just by surviving out loud. 2 weeks after my first talk, I got an email from the mayor's office. They were organizing a citywide domestic violence awareness summit. They wanted me to speak. Me. Leah Morgan, the woman who once covered bruises with makeup and lies. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Tessa read it over my shoulder and grinned, "Told you you're famous now." I wasn't famous. I was just finally seen. I said yes. Not for attention. But because I knew somewhere in that audience, a woman like me would be sitting in silence, waiting for a sign. And I was ready to be that sign. Ready to speak, even if my voice trembled. I spotted them the moment I stepped onto the stage. Judith, arms folded, lips tight. And beside her, Ben's new girlfriend. They were seated near the back, invited through the church that partnered with the city. They didn't know I was the speaker. Not yet. I adjusted the mic. The lights hit my face. My cane tapped the floor as I stood tall. I took a breath, looked straight at them, and began. My name is Leah Morgan. I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was once beaten so badly I couldn't walk. Judith's jaw dropped. People turned. Ben's girlfriend stared. And I didn't flinch. I didn't need to raise my voice. Every sentence landed like a hammer on glass. I spoke of the bruises. The lies. The woman who watched and did nothing. Judith shrank in her seat, her face pale beneath her powdered skin. I didn't name names, but she knew. Everyone knew. I told them about Tessa's drawings. Kyle's fear. The night I almost didn't wake up. And then I paused. Let the silence hang thick in the air. Let them feel it, the weight of truth. When I finally said, "And I am not broken," a wave of applause erupted. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at her. And I smiled. Judith stood up mid-speech. "I didn't know, she never told us," she shouted, voice trembling. But no one clapped. No one nodded. No one cared. The applause for me rolled on, rising like a wave that washed her guilt away in silence. She sat back down, her face red, her power gone. After the event, a line of women waited to hug me. One said, "You said what I've never dared to say out loud." Another whispered, "I left because of you." But the one that broke me was the teenager who held my hand and said, "You made me believe I could grow up safe." That night, I didn't cry because I was broken. I cried because I was finally whole. A week after the summit, Judith showed up at my door. No warning. No flowers. Just shame behind her sunglasses. "I came to say I'm sorry," she mumbled. I didn't invite her in. I stood on the porch with my cane, my children behind me, taller now. She looked around, searching for weakness. But there was none left. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I don't need you in our lives." Her eyes welled up. "I raised him wrong," she whispered. "I know," I replied. Then I closed the door. Not out of hate, but because healing sometimes means refusing to reopen old wounds. That was the last time we ever spoke. The local paper ran a story. From survivor to speaker, Leah Morgan's voice is changing lives. It was pinned on the community board at Tessa's school. Kyle's teacher mentioned it during pickup. At the grocery store, people smiled and said, "Thank you for what you do." Not, "Poor thing." Not, "Sorry for your pain." Just, respect. It felt strange at first. But then I remembered the years I spent invisible, the bruises, the silence, the shame. Now, my story was a lantern for others. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a protector. A mother. A leader. And when I signed my name on the city's advocacy board form, I wrote it proudly. Leah Morgan, founder, the Bruised Not Broken Project. Tessa stood in front of her 8th grade class and said, "My hero isn't a celebrity. It's my mom." She didn't cry. She stood tall, the way I used to pretend to be. Kyle made me a handmade card for Mother's Day. On the front, he'd drawn a woman with a cape and a cane. Underneath, it said, "Strong looks like you." They no longer feared the door slamming. No longer flinched at raised voices. They laughed louder now. Dreamed bigger. And when people asked them about their father, they said, "He made us tough. But she made us whole." That's how I knew. I didn't just survive. I rewrote their future. I still walk with a limp. Some mornings, the ache reminds me of everything I lost. But then I hear my kids laughing in the kitchen. See emails from women who left after hearing my story. Stand on stages where I once would have hidden in the back row. I've traded shame for purpose. Silence for power. My scars don't define me, they crown me. Because I wasn't just a wife who got hurt. I was a woman who stood up when it nearly killed her. Who raised warriors while carrying wounds. They broke my body, but not my spirit. I am Leah Morgan. And I'm living proof. You can survive the fire, and rise from it, too.